The House of Commons burst into laughter, but not at a joke. All eyes were on Keir Starmer as Nigel Farage's sharp words echoed through the chamber. Starmer froze for a second. The Prime Minister, who had just promised strength and clarity, now looked completely exposed. The smirks on the backbench weren't just Tory. Even some behind Starmer couldn't hide their faces. In less than a minute, Nigel Farage, who isn't even an MP, turned Starmer into a punchline in the very room where he should have looked untouchable. And the cameras caught everything. Just days after becoming Prime Minister, Keir Starmer walked into Prime Minister's questions already surrounded by tension. The mood in Westminster was far from celebratory. The public, the press, and even some inside Labour had begun asking the same question: what does Starmer really stand for? His campaign was based on change, but change was already starting to feel like more of the same. Across the country, people are angry. The migrant crisis hasn't slowed down. The NHS is still stretched to breaking point. Bills are high, trust is low, and promises are beginning to sound like broken records. Starmer may have won the election, but public patience is already wearing thin. To make matters worse, a surprise visitor was watching from the gallery. Nigel Farage, leader of Reform UK, had returned to Parliament, not as an MP, but as a force that couldn't be ignored. His party's success in the general election had shaken both Labour and the Conservatives. And even without a seat, his presence in the Commons was making people nervous. The tension inside PMQs was thick. Starmer rose to speak with a carefully crafted tone, clearly hoping to project calm leadership. He spoke about unity, rebuilding, and moving forward. But the words didn't land. The room was restless. The opposition looked ready to strike. Even some Labour MPs seemed distracted, whispering, checking phones, and glancing toward the gallery, where Farage sat with a slight grin. Starmer's responses to early questions were polished, but overly safe. He avoided firm answers on key topics. When pushed on immigration, he used vague phrases like multi-level solutions and balanced priorities. When asked about the economy, he talked about stability without naming any specific changes. The Conservative front bench didn't even bother to shout back. Instead, they smiled. They knew what was coming. Then the moment everyone remembers began to build. A backbench MP referenced Reform UK's rise in the polls and jokingly asked if Starmer would consider merging with them, since they at least know what they stand for. The chamber chuckled lightly. Starmer tried to respond with a smirk, but it fell flat, and then, in the most unexpected move of the day, Nigel Farage stood up. As a guest, he wasn't supposed to speak, but threw a public statement minutes later. In the press gallery just outside, Farage delivered the line that would break the internet: "At least I've never changed my mind to win a vote. Sir Keir bends whichever way the wind blows. Today, he's not leading Britain. He's managing the silence." The clip spread like wildfire. Though spoken outside the official debate, the impact was felt immediately inside the chamber. The Conservative benches erupted in laughter. Even some Labour MPs stared at their shoes, unable to defend their leader's shifting stances. What was supposed to be Starmer's first strong PMQs turned into a moment of doubt about his clarity, about his strength, and about how long he could hold the spotlight without being exposed. He may have been standing at the dispatch box, but for those watching, both in Parliament and across the country, it was Nigel Farage who had taken control of the room. Keir Starmer had just finished dodging another tough question about rising immigration numbers when the atmosphere in the chamber shifted. The energy changed. You could feel it in the body language of MPs. Shoulders leaned forward, eyes sharpened, hands tapping impatiently on benches. And then it happened. From the press gallery above, Nigel Farage made his move, not with official permission, but with perfect timing. After being spotted entering Parliament earlier that day, most believed Farage was simply observing. But his sudden impromptu press moment, deliberately timed to overlap with PMQs, was explosive. As Starmer answered a question about border enforcement, Farage turned to reporters just outside the Commons floor and said loud enough for the microphones to catch, "Britain didn't vote for more management. It voted for leadership. And right. Now, Starmer looks more like an administrator than a man with a mission. The message hit social media instantly. Dozens of political commentators tweeted Farage's quote within minutes. But what followed was even worse for Starmer. A second jab, more brutal than the first, arrived just as the chamber was settling down. He speaks about unity, but even his own MPs can't explain what he believes in. Labour didn't win because of Starmer, they won because people were sick of the Tories. There's a difference. And inside the Commons, the damage was clear. Starmer's next attempt to respond to a Tory question fell completely flat. He began to say, "We are working hard to regain," but was interrupted by a wave of chuckles from the backbenches. The speaker tapped for order, but the snickering spread. The right side of the chamber was almost gleeful, sensing victory. Some Conservative MPs mimicked Starmer's calm voice mockingly. One even held up a paper with "reverse mode" written on it, alluding to Starmer's frequent policy U-turns. Then came the knockout punch. Conservative MP Jacob Belridge rose and asked with theatrical concern, "Can the Prime Minister clarify if he still agrees with what he said about migration last week, or has his opinion changed since Farage spoke a few minutes ago?" The room exploded. Laughter echoed. Even a few Labour MPs covered their faces in embarrassment. Starmer paused, clearly frustrated, and replied in a sharp tone, "I will not be drawn into pantomime politics. This government is focused on results." But the damage was done. People weren't listening to his answer, they were still reacting to the jabs. And somewhere just outside the chamber, Nigel Farage was smiling. He had managed to hijack PMQs without saying a word inside it. The irony was painful. Farage wasn't even sitting on a bench, yet somehow, he was still the one pulling the strings of the conversation. TV stations began cutting away from Starmer's speech mid-sentence to play Farage's quotes instead. News tickers flashed with headlines like, "Farage embarrasses Starmer from the gallery," and "Labour leader mocked after PMQ's stumble." In political terms, it was a public unraveling. The worst part for Labour wasn't just the mockery, it was that Farage's words stuck. Viewers at home, many of whom had voted Labour just weeks ago, started asking themselves, is this the leader we hoped for? Or just another polished talker with no fire behind his words? Starmer tried to recover, pushing forward with prepared points on job growth and housing, but the moment was lost. Every answer sounded like damage control. Every sentence felt like it came too late. Farage's short statements had cut deeper than a full debate could. They weren't just insults, they were accusations that rang true for many disillusioned voters, and in a chamber designed to showcase the strength of a prime minister, Starmer had instead become the quiet center of a joke he couldn't escape. The clash inside Parliament was over, but outside, the real storm had only just begun. Within minutes of Nigel Farage's brutal takedown and Starmer's awkward reaction, the internet caught fire. Social media didn't just react, it erupted. On Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube, clips of the exchange began spreading like wildfire. The hashtag Starmer humiliated soared to the top of UK trends in less than 30 minutes. A short 12-second video showing Starmer stumbling through a reply while MPs laughed behind him was shared over 10 million times in just a few hours. Another clip paired Farage's quote, "Starmer's managing the silence, not leading the country," with dramatic music and slow-motion shots of the Prime Minister looking flustered. It went viral instantly and memes flooded every corner of the internet. One image showed Starmer behind a school desk labeled, "Student PM," while Farage stood at a chalkboard labeled, "Headmaster of the Opposition." Another showed Starmer with a remote labeled, "Policy Rewind," with the caption, "Backpedal activated." The internet wasn't just mocking Starmer, it was branding him. Influencers, political commentators, and even comedians jumped in. Right-wing accounts celebrated the Farage moment as proof that the public had made a mistake choosing Labour. Left-leaning voices, meanwhile, tried to focus on policy, but the damage was already done. For every post defending Starmer, there were 10 mocking him. Even mainstream media couldn't ignore it. Sky News aired a special segment titled "The Day Farage Stole the Spotlight," featuring a full breakdown of the moment-by-moment events inside and outside the chamber. GB News called it one of the most embarrassing PMQs performances in Recent memory, while the Telegraph published an opinion piece titled, "If This Is Starmer's Strength, Britain is in Trouble." The Daily Mail's front page didn't hold back. A huge headline read, "Farage Floor Show, How the Real Opposition Shamed the PM in Front of the Nation." Even The Guardian, known for supporting Labour causes, acknowledged the hit, calling the moment an early test of leadership composure, one Starmer struggled to pass. Behind closed doors, sources whispered about panic inside Labour HQ, staffers scrambled to control the narrative. They pushed out talking points about a distraction, tactics, non-MP commentary, and the importance of staying focused on delivery, but no one was buying it. The MPs returning to their constituencies were met with uncomfortable conversations. Voters were asking, why did Starmer look so weak? Why didn't he fight back? And then came the polls day. An overnight Snap poll revealed that 61% of respondents thought Farage won the moment, while only 18% believed Starmer showed strength. Even worse, in a flash opinion poll by Redfield, 44% of Labour voters admitted they were concerned about Starmer's leadership tone and confidence. But perhaps the most powerful moment of the night came not from any news anchor, but from a simple TikTok video by a 19-year-old student, captioned, "We voted for change. We didn't vote for silence." The post got over 1 million likes and 250K shares in 6 hours. It said what many were thinking, and said it in the voice of the next generation. This wasn't just about politics anymore. It was about image. Starmer's reputation had taken a visible, public blow, and that kind of damage doesn't just disappear. The internet has a long memory, and right now, it remembers Starmer as the Prime Minister who got laughed at, while Nigel Farage smiled from the sidelines. When a Prime Minister gets mocked at PMQs, it can be brushed off as typical parliamentary games. But when that moment becomes a national talking point, a viral sensation, and the start of growing doubt, even within his own party, it signals something far deeper. And for Keir Starmer, this wasn't just a bad day. It was a red flag. A warning that he may be losing control of the national narrative. Just weeks into his leadership, Starmer came into office promising strength, clarity, and responsibility. But his early weeks have been filled with cautious speeches, vague promises, and controlled appearances that feel more like a civil servant's briefing than a leader's battle cry. The public, fresh off a long stretch of chaos under Tory rule, expected something different. Instead, they're starting to feel the same old fog, just with a calmer voice. And now, with Nigel Farage seizing momentum without even holding a seat in Parliament, that fog is being challenged. Farage, for all his controversy, speaks in sharp lines. He doesn't hesitate. He cuts through with simplicity, sometimes to provoke, sometimes to win, but always with force. And that's something Starmer is struggling to match. Inside Labour, whispers are growing. Some MPs are quietly admitting they're concerned. They say Starmer's media-trained calm might not survive a year in today's brutal political battlefield. Constituents are flooding inboxes, asking why their leader looks unsure, even passive. The press isn't helping. Headlines like "Starmer struggles to command" and "PMQs panic" are fueling a fresh round of questions. Is Starmer inspiring confidence, or just managing the decline? The biggest risk isn't just embarrassment, it's narrative capture. Right now, Farage is shaping the national conversation. He's setting the tone with phrases like "Britain voted for leadership, not management," and social media is repeating those words louder than anything coming from Downing Street. Even when Starmer speaks clearly, he's being overshadowed. That's the danger of silence. If you don't fill the space, someone else will. The opposition has caught on. The Tories are rebuilding their attack strategy around one word: weakness. Meanwhile, Reform UK is positioning itself as the party that says what people are thinking, unfiltered, bold, emotional. It's not about policy yet. It's about feeling. About who looks like they care. And right now, Farage feels loud and proud, while Starmer feels quiet and cautious, and it doesn't stop in Parliament. On the street, in pubs, online, there's a shift. People are asking, did we vote for a leader, or just a manager who doesn't want to offend anyone? It's a powerful question. And unless Starmer answers it soon, he may lose more than just the public's attention, he may lose their belief that in politics, image is power. And in one afternoon, Keir Starmer's image cracked, right in front of cameras, MPs, and millions of voters. Farage didn't need a seat. He didn't need official permission. He simply used the moment. And now, Starmer is left trying to reclaim control of a story that's already been written by someone else, unless the Prime Minister finds his voice, and fast, he risks becoming exactly what Farage said he was, a manager of silence. And that's not what Britain voted for.